Prime Minister Netanyahu says his government is determined to narrow the gaps between Arabs and Jews by allocating more resources. The U.S. military flies a low-level bomber over South Korea in response to North Korea's alleged nuclear test. And Mexican drug lord El Chapo Guzman secretly met actor Sean Penn before his arrest, which may have helped in his recapture. Hello and welcome to I-24 News. I'm David Matlin here in the Jaffa Port of Israel. Well, in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said at the start of Sunday's cabinet meeting that huge gaps have emerged between the country's Arab and Jewish residents. And the government is determined to narrow them by both allocating more resources to the Arab sector and enforcing the laws there. His comments came in the wake of the government's approval of a 15 billion shekel multi-year plan 2 weeks ago for development of the Arab sector.
Anyone with eyes in his head knows there are large gaps between the Israeli Arab and Jewish public, resource gaps and gaps in law enforcement, gaps and discrepancies in right obligations. These gaps formed during decades, and it's the time to make a major national effort to reduce them. In recent years, the governments in my lead invested significant resources in the Arab sector.
And we're joined now by our diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev in the studio. Tal, thanks for being with us.
Hi, David.
So Netanyahu has faced a lot of criticism now. What do you make of his response?
Well, last week's Tel Aviv terror attack perpetrated by an Arab-Israeli citizen who was allegedly assisted by a group of friends and acquaintances has sparked an intense debate about law enforcement in the Arab sector, and the attack happened just days after the government approved this $3.85 billion plans for social and economic investment in the Arab sector. And Netanyahu has been under fire from the opposition, both left and right. We heard the leader of the right-wing Israel Beitenu, Avigdor Lieberman, say that the Tel Aviv attack is the result of overly forgiving policies towards Arab extremism. But on the other hand, from the left side of the opposition, they slammed Netanyahu's response to the attack, which basically singled out the Arab sector as responsible for the attack at whole. And that critic continued last week after it was reported that the investment plan, this ambitious investment plan, is currently on hold, and it depends on sufficient law enforcement in the Arab sector. But Netanyahu seems to be unmoved by the criticism. He clarifies today that there are two different plans. One is designed to close the gaps in education, infrastructure, economy, and trade. But the other one, which was decided upon months ago, is to step up efforts in the Arab sector to enforce the law in various realms, including building laws, incitement, and illegal arms. But Netanyahu clarifies that one will not advance without the other. And it's worth noting that the truth is that the Arab leaders themselves have been urging the government for decades to address crime rates and illegal arms in the Arab sector, but so far nothing has come out of it. Netanyahu today pledges that this time it will work. Time will probably tell.
Well, thank you very much, Tal Shalev, our diplomatic correspondent. And as we mentioned here, slain Tel Aviv shooter Nashat Milhem's father and brother were released from police custody on Sunday morning in order to attend the shooter's private funeral, Channel 10 reported. Well, Milhem was killed on Friday after a shootout with police and counterterrorism forces. According to local media, the family said that it wants to have a quiet and short funeral ceremony without any political overtones. And Israeli government ministers are set to vote on a new bill that calls for the labeling of products imported from European countries that have motioned to specially label products from Israeli settlements. I-24 News reporter Danny Swibel has the story.
Israeli government ministers will vote on whether to support a bill calling for the labeling of products imported from mostly EU countries that decided to label products from the West Bank, Golan Heights, and East Jerusalem. The EU directive sparked an uproar in Israel and among Israeli politicians from the right to center-left. Israeli parliament member Shuli Moalem-Rafaeli from the right-wing Jewish Home Party, who co-sponsored the bill with fellow Jewish Home member Yinon Magal, said the step can, quote, deter countries from changing the labeling of products from Israel. The thinking behind Sunday's vote is that Israel has to defend itself in order to counteract damage done by pro-Palestinian pressure, and a tough stance by the State of Israel might somehow work to maintain its status.
And Egypt's new parliament held its opening session this morning more than 3 years after a court dissolved the formerly Islamist-dominated chamber. On its first day back, the body's expected to choose a speaker and now has 15 days to approve hundreds of laws issued by executive decree during its suspension. The new members swore a constitutional oath to protect the Republican regime and respect the Constitution and law.
I swear to God that I will faithfully protect the Republican regime and that I will respect the Constitution and law and that I will completely attend to people's needs. I will protect the country's independence and the unity and the peace of its lands.
And earlier we were joined by I-24 News correspondent Jacob Wirtschafter from Cairo.
What we're looking at here is a more diverse parliament in terms of its membership and a less diverse parliament, at least by Western standards, in terms of the ideological makeup of the body. We've got more women in this parliament than any Egyptian parliament in history. You're talking about 15% of this parliament, 90 women out of about 350, around 448 members of parliament. We also have more Coptic Christians in this parliament than in any previous Egyptian legislative body. So there's going to be some diversity in here. But yes, this parliament is backing President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's initiatives around terrorism and around the economy.
Well, North Korea's leaders said the country's fourth nuclear test last week was a self-defensive step against a U.S. threat of nuclear war, while the U.S. deployed a B-52 bomber flanked by fighter jets on a low-level flight over its ally, South Korea, as a show of force in response. The B-52 is capable of carrying nuclear weapons. I-24 News Desk has more.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said the country conducted last week's hydrogen bomb test as a, quote, self-defensive step against a U.S. threat of nuclear war and had a sovereign right to do so without being criticized.
The North Korean H-bomb test is a self-defensive step for reliably defending the peace on the Korean Peninsula and the regional security from the danger of nuclear war caused by the U.S.-led imperialists.
Experts believe the test, which produced a massive tremor of 5.1, is too small to be a proper hydrogen bomb test. But North Korea's fourth nuclear test, considered a blatant violation of its international obligations based on statements from the head of the U.S. Pacific Command, continues to incur much anger from the U.S., who conducted a low-level flight over a U.S. military base near Seoul as a show of force in response. Japanese elite paratroopers are currently conducting defense drills amid tensions in the Korean Peninsula, as well as the South China Sea.
The self-defense force is tasked with protecting the lives of people, their property and property freedom, as well as our land, sky and seas. In order to be able to protect, there is a need for the self-defense force to be able to respond to any sort of emergency that may arise.
South Korea, meanwhile, resumed propaganda broadcasts into North Korea, a tactic that prompted Pyongyang to threaten military strikes when it was last employed during a cross-border crisis last year. Though the two Koreas are considered on the brink of war by many, North Koreans on Friday celebrated the latest nuclear test, an action designed to set the stage for a rare general meeting of its ruling Workers' Party, their first since 1980.
An American actor, Sean Penn, secretly interviewed Joaquin El Chapo Guzman before the Mexican drug lord's recapture for an article that appeared Saturday in Rolling Stone magazine and may have helped in his recapture. ABC News has more.
Captured. The wanted poster says it all. The man called El Chapo is once again in the arms of the law.
It is a very big deal that they were able to pull this off.
Joaquin Guzman, the most wanted drug lord in the world, now the prized prisoner of Mexican authorities. They tracked him down Friday after 6 months on his trail. Mexican Marines storming his hideout in El Chapo's home state of Sinaloa, killing 5 of his gunmen in the pre-dawn raid. Inside, a deadly arsenal of military-grade weapons, including 50-caliber sniper rifles, M16s with grenade launchers, and Russian rocket-propelled grenades. But no El Chapo. They caught him at a nearby hotel where he was photographed in handcuffs wearing a dirty T-shirt. Mexico's president tweeted, "Mission accomplished. We got him." And they settled the score with the drug kingpin who escaped right before their eyes last July as a security camera rolled. Guzman is seen pacing in his cell, removing his ankle monitor, then disappearing down this mile-long tunnel custom dug by his own team of engineers, whisking El Chapo away to this house and to life on the lam. It was the second time he'd broken out of a Mexican prison. The big question now, will Mexico finally agree to repeated U.S. requests to extradite El Chapo for trial? He's allegedly behind 25% of America's drug trafficking. Kenneth Moten, ABC News, Washington.
And that's all for our top stories here this hour at I-24 News. You can stay with us at our Facebook, Twitter, and of course our website, i24news.tv. I'm David Matlin in the Jaffa Port of Israel. Thanks for joining us.